Okay, so this is an interesting reel, and if you were at a flea market or an antique mall and you happen to see this from some distance away, you might think, well, that's a neat oddball reel, let's go check it out. And so you get over there and you pick it up and you find out it's all plastic, and you think, oh, that's just a cheap disposable plastic reel. Although it is plastic, not so fast. This is kind of an interesting reel that's has some interesting features that you wouldn't find in a cheap and disposable, quote unquote, disposable plastic reel. One of the neat features about it is that this does have an oscillating spool for even distribution of the line. And it also has a large pickup pin in the spinner head. So rather than just being a spinner head with teeth on the thing, it's got a nice pickup pin, and then of course it has that oscillating spool. So a little bit more than meets the eye on this. This is a True Temper number 420, and I think it's made right around 1967. The advertisement says, these spin casting reels were engineered from the drawing board up to make spin casting easier, more foolproof, and more fun. They feature exclusive developments, new materials, and are designed for fisherman comfort and pride of ownership. For instance, a roller pickup pin engages line instantly on the retrieve. A 4-to-1 gear ratio makes retrieving fast, lure action deadly. The oscillating spool lays line down evenly and smoothly without packing or binding. The thumb lever assures perfect casting control. The exterior finish is smooth and rounded for comfortable palming all day long. And the unique unitized construction permits quick, easy take-apart in seconds. Add tough new space-age materials that won't rust and resist impact, abuse, and wear, and you've got a real winner. Pre-spooled with 115 yards, 10-pound test monofilament. Original selling price $15. Another neat feature about this reel is that you can access the inside by simply unscrewing this here. You can access the gears and so on for servicing without taking off any screws. Basically, you just unscrew this side plate here. So we're going to take this apart and service it. And basically, the only thing right now that's wrong, quote unquote, wrong with it is that it's a little tight from grease, from dried up grease. So we're going to take this apart and service it and get it running like new again. Now, one of the primary reason in these videos, you'll see that I have a towel down as my working surface. And the primary reason for that is that little springs and shims and screws and so on tend to bounce, and they bounce a lot easier on a hard surface than they do on a small surface. And so this sort of buffers the bounce a little bit and prevents them from bouncing off the table or across the room, or at least reduces that chance. And of course, when you're doing these various services of oddball reels that you may not be familiar with or can't find a schematic for, it's always a good idea to take lots of photos, which is easier to do with modern cell phones. so that you know how to put it back together. Look at that. That main gear is not metal. I don't know if that's nylon or what. It's a transparent plastic-like material. And what have we got going on in here? I've never been into one of these, so I'm seeing it for the first time also. Okay. So that must be part of the no, that's the anti-reverse gear. I'm not quite sure what's going on with this part here. But basically you have this crank. Let's see here. You have this crankshaft. And the question is that, I don't see that moving. Let's see if that anti-reverse, it looks like it's supposed to come off of there. I don't know if it's pressed on. You can see that there's a little gap between that and the main shaft assembly. It might just be pressed on there. I don't think it needs to come off. So there's a drag washer. Oh, this one does come. Okay, so that one, okay, that's all it is. It's just transparent. Looked like there was a washer on that side, but this one almost has a rubber-like consistency. Feels very much like rubber. So that rubber-like one goes there, and then you have your main gear. Then you have this red drag washer, and then you have this, and then there's a notch here, or a post here that goes in that little hole right there that locks all this into place. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the parts tray for cleaning. It's a screw-on cap. So then you remove this retaining nut here, and then the spinner head pops off. You can see the line pickup there. The spool is also is non-metallic, some kind of I don't know if it's nylon or what have you, but looks like you have to spin that a little bit, okay, to get that off. So that basically, there's a little notch in there with a large hole at one end and narrow at the other. And so to put it on, you put this through the large hole, and then you turn it, and then that locks it in place. And this is the shaft basically that oscillates the spool up and down. So that could definitely use some lubrication there, because that spool's moving up and down on that. That'll make it move a lot more smoothly. Let's see, I think we might be able to get this pinion assembly out of there without having to take off the spring, if at first we remove the push button. We'll see. Okay, it does pull out. Don't want to damage these, because these again are all some kind of a nylon or plastic in nature. So hopefully now, yeah, we can get the thumb button out of there. And the question is, can we get that axle shaft out of there without having to take off the spring? Okay, out comes this actuator here that runs the that oscillates the spool. And let's just see if we can back this out the hole for the thumb drive. Not looking like I'm going to be able to get that out without taking the spring off. So what do we have? A C-clip, hopefully? It's so small I can't really bite it with the needle nose. And it's not coming out like that. That spring's under a lot of tension. There, now I can see I'll hold that spring so it don't fly out. There's the little, see how it does even bounces on this towel, but not as badly. So there's your little E-clip. And now we can take off the spring and the gear, and then we can pull it out this side. So I'm going to reassemble that, well, just that part of it for now, just so I know which. I want to keep that gear the same orientation that it was, so I'm just going to leave that there on there for now. So now we've got the reel basically totally disassembled and ready for the parts tray for cleaning. There is a spring in the star drag. We had star drag adjuster. So what I'm going to do now, and I'll say this each time, probably try to remember to say this each time, but I am going to the sink, and I showed this process once, and that was in the Johnson 115 video. I showed the whole process of going to the sink and how thoroughly I scrubbed the parts with Dawn dish soap and sometimes WD-40 and a toothbrush, and get all of the parts thoroughly clean and rinsed so that any loose particulate matter, sand, etc. gets completely out of there so that it does not get into the gears and damage the gears and so on. And also one point to make sure is that you get down in here with, I usually, so down in, let's say this hole for the axle shaft, I'll put my finger underneath there to close it off, and I'll fill that with WD-40 and then thoroughly clean out that journal there, or whatever you want to call it. And same way with the side handle. If you clean off the shafts, that's great, but if you don't get the grease, old grease and stuff out of the journals into which they fit, you're not going to have as thorough of a job, as thorough of a cleaning. and it's not going to function as good as it otherwise could. So I'm going to head to the sink and rinse and scrub these parts, and then we'll be back to reassemble. Okay, and just like that, we've got all the parts cleaned, and we're ready to start lubricating and assembling. Some of these parts have little residual grease on them that is hardened and didn't come off with the various solvents. So I'm going to take a little bit of fine steel wool and clean that off. And also on the various shafts, to get any residual grease off of those, shine those up. Okay, so this drives the oscillation of the spool. So this can go in like that, with the hole going into the inside of the reel and the little nipple on here on the outside towards the spool. And then we've got this little gear here. That goes there. And this little lever fits into that hole on the oscillating shaft. And then into the hole on that gear face. Like that. And I'm going to have to oil that. And this is keyed. I really don't see any major difference in terms of which side faces which way, but we'll put it back on the way we found it. And then we have to get that spring on there and that little E-clip. Okay. There was a little burr in there. In fact, there it is right there. I don't know if that's a piece of sand or it was a burr on the plastic, but it was preventing the smooth movement of that gear. Now it's working fine. So good to get that out of there. All right, now we can go ahead with putting the thumb button back in. And this gear here. You can see the oscillating mechanism is working. Now we can start to assemble the crank assembly. And we've got the rubber drag washer there. Again, I don't lubricate these. Again, my idea is that these work off of friction, and it seems to defeat the purpose if you're lubricating surfaces that are supposed to create friction and thus drag. So here is the main shaft here, and that peg has to go in that hole like that. And then we should oil these surfaces here. And reinstall that into there, making sure that the anti-reverse is working properly, and it is. Then we're ready for the handle, and that'll kind of button that up and keep it all in place. And the handle screws on. And then we have a nut. Guess that handle doesn't keep everything in place, but some of it. Okay, and then we're ready for our star drag adjustment. including the spring. And then the screw that holds that all into place. And then we've got to grease the teeth on this main gear. And when I first took this thing off, it was a little bit stuck on there, so I'm just gonna put a slight amount of grease on those threads and wipe off any excess. And then this goes on. To lock it, you go counterclockwise. You go counterclockwise to lock it on there. Oh, that's running a lot smoother already. All right, and then remember to put on the spool. That fat part of that slot, that circular, goes on over the nipple on the end of this oscillator. And then you turn it counterclockwise to lock it in. But before we get too crazy with that, trying to decide, do I want to grease or oil this? I guess this is one that I would typically grease. Grease the shaft here, so that, especially because that's an oscillating spool, so it's going to need to move up and down on that post or shaft or whatever you want to call it. And then lock that in place. There. Boy, that's running a lot better than it was when we started. So now we want to make sure that our pickup pin is properly lubricated. And when you're servicing this spinner head, you always want to examine. Now you can see that it's been used. You can see where the line is the fishing line has sort of polished the surface there and here. But when I touch that with my fingernail, I do feel a very slight cut in that. Nothing too bad, but that's one place that you want to have perfectly smooth. You don't want the line catching there. That can influence how well the thing casts. It can abrade line. And when there's a slight cut in there, it tends to want to catch and get deeper. So I'm going to just polish that off. It's not real deep, so I'm not too worried. I don't have to work too hard here to polish that off. And now my fingernail doesn't catch at all. So it's perfectly smooth and not likely to be a problem. And then of course you want to take and push out the line pickup pin and make sure that there are no cuts in that. And in this case, in this one, I'm not seeing any cuts or abrasions in there. So that one doesn't need to be filed or sanded. Now, one thing I like about these, this has a relatively large diameter pickup pin. It's not one of them skinny little ones, and I feel like the larger pins are less likely to abrade the line. I don't know if that's true or not, but that would be my thought, that the bigger the pickup pin, the less abrasion on the line. You have less of an angle to which that line is wrapping around there. So this spool is ready to put back on the, or this spinner head is ready to put back on the reel. It's keyed, so the flat side against the flat side of the shaft, and then you have your retaining nut. And because a lot of these parts are plastic, especially those that are threaded, be careful that they aren't cross-threaded, because that plastic will get boogered up pretty quickly otherwise. You get that on there, and we're ready for the cover. And then the last thing you want to do is just put a drop or two of oil in that blade on the handle, or the handle on the crank, and spin that around good. More often than not, if you're hearing a squeaking sound when you're winding your reel, it's just that the handle hasn't been properly lubricated. Once you get that lubricated, there shouldn't be any squeak of any kind. And boy, look how nice and smooth that works now. I mean, it wasn't going anything that smoothly before. And listen to that button. Isn't that a beautiful sound? Such a nostalgic sound. Reminds me of being a little kid when that's all we fished with was closed face Spincast reels, and you'd make your cast and you'd click that beautiful sound, very nostalgic. So that's a really neat reel. I mean, it is mostly plastic and nylon parts, but that was advertised as an asset or unique quality of this reel. Made it very light, kind of an oddball reel in terms of its design and look, which I love. I love the oscillating spool, the unique button. But there you have it, a True Temper 420, made right around 1967. There were a couple different colors available, but neat reel. Okay, thanks for watching.